too much time left of center. It's the apocalypse is upon us. We must walk and eat bugs. We must repent of the capitalistic system. We think that's all the wrong way to present it. What we say is that we can have more energy, more mobility, more freedom. It's just going to be cleaner, better, faster, and cheaper. This is not doom and gloom about we're all going to die next Tuesday. It's about, wow, this is the next thing.
Welcome back, everybody. Richard Baker, founder of Collective Responsibility, here today with another episode of Sustainable Ambassador Podcast. Through this podcast, I'm speaking with leaders around the world about the environmental, social, and economic challenges that we face, but more importantly, the work that they're doing. For me, there's a simple goal here, and that's to engage and inspire the viewers to take the next steps in their own journey. A journey that I hope will result in the development and deployment of sustainable solutions, programs, platforms, and collaborations. In this episode, I'm extremely excited to have Bob Inglis join me. Bob is a former U.S. representative for the state of South Carolina and founder of Republican. Republican is a community of energy optimists and climate realists changing the conversation about climate change. So with that, Bob, thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Great to be with you, Rich. Thanks.
All right, so as a starting point, it'd be great to have a personal introduction and a little about the work that you're doing over there at Republican.
Yes, we're conservatives who care about climate change. That's us at republician.org. Ian is for energy, entrepreneurship, the environment, and we're out to convince conservatives to engage on this crucial topic.
Hey, we'll be getting into that, but as a starting point, maybe who are you? Can you introduce yourself and maybe your path into the climate space? I mean, what was your background and what brought you into the space?
Well, so I was in Congress for 6 years saying that climate change was nonsense. I didn't know anything about it except that Al Gore was for it. Then I was out of Congress 6 years doing commercial real estate law again in Greenville, South Carolina. Had the opportunity to run for the same seat again in 2004. So that's the year that our son, the eldest of our 5 kids who just turned 18, voting for the first time, came to me and said, "Dad, I'll vote for you, but you're going to clean up your act on the environment." His 4 sisters agreed, his mother agreed. New constituency, you need to respond to those people, They can change the locks on the doors to your house. Very important to respond to those people. So that was step 1 of a 3-step metamorphosis. Step 2 is going to Antarctica with the science committee and seeing the evidence in the ice core drillings. Step 3, another science committee trip and something of a spiritual awakening, which seems improbable right on a godless science committee trip, because we all know that all scientists are godless. Apparently not, because this Aussie climate scientist who was showing me the glories of the Great Barrier Reef, I could see was worshiping God as he showed me the Great Barrier Reef. Later, without the snorkels in our mouths, he told me about conservation changes he was making in his life to love God and love people. I got right inspired. I want to be like Scott, loving God and loving people. So I came home and introduced the Raise Wages, Cut Carbon Act of 2009. Note to self, do not introduce carbon tax in midst of Great Recession when you represent perhaps the reddest district of the reddest state of the nation. It will not go well. It did not go well at all. After 12 years in Congress, Republican runoff in June of 2010, I got 29% of the vote. The other guy got the other 71% of the vote. So at that point, a foundation came to me and said, Inglis, you're unusual zoo animal, actual conservative, 93 American Conservative Union rating, 100% Christian Coalition, 100% National Right to Life, A with the NRA. They said, actual conservative, will you speak and write for the proposition? And so that's what I've done ever since. It's now this thing called republician.org. So yeah, I went from being in conscious disregard of the facts to this guy that was all charged up about the best idea I came across when I was in Congress. It's not my idea. It's the idea of really just about every economist in the world, is to simply bring accountability for the side effects of burning fossil fuels. Add the cost to all products. Have them bear that cost to the marketplace where they can be judged. And the greener, cleaner stuff will succeed while the dirty stuff made accountable will start to fail.
So first off, I love your 3-step metamorphosis. I've heard from others who I won't like how you labeled yourself. I won't say like they were resistant. They didn't. It wasn't about necessarily they didn't believe in the science. At the time, they're just in the wrong spot. They hadn't seen it. They need their children to say we're going to lock the door, whatever it may be. But I'm curious in kind of where you are now and your focus on helping conservatives kind of get on with climate change and take this up. How do you view the conservative case for addressing climate change at this point then?
Well, you're onto something there because that is the challenge. This has been culturally marked as an issue of the left. I'm not sure. In some cases, it was intentional, to create a campaign wedge. In other cases, it's just the language that's used. Dan Kahan at Yale has a joint appointment in law and psychology. He says his research says that left of center folks are a different personality type, really, than right of center folks. Left of center folks are communitarian egalitarians. They focus on the community doing well, and they focus particularly on fairness. So they're communitarian egalitarians. Right of center folks, he says, are hierarchical individualist. They work through a chain of command, so they're hierarchical, and they believe in individual effort and reward, so they're individualist. And so the language of the left has basically been the language of climate change. It's communitarian, egalitarian language. And so no wonder right of center folks just don't feel at home in the conversation.
So then what's the language that you use, or what's the case that you make in front of conservatives for, I won't say conversion, but adoption, openness, engagement?
Yeah, it's mostly this, that the free enterprise system can deliver innovation at speed and scale if you just fix the economics. What we have here is a problem of economics that has an environmental consequence. Fix the economics. What it is that I'm Inglis Industries, and I get away with belching and burning and dumping into the trash dump of the sky without any accountability. I got a competitor across town, and she's got a cleaner process, newer equipment, bigger loan. I beat her every day in the marketplace because I get to dump for free into the trash dump of the sky. Now, possible solution? Prop her up with some subsidies. Make it so she can compete with me. That doesn't ring too nicely on the right of center, folks. Another possibility is regulate me out of existence. That didn't ring too well either. But how about just make me accountable for dumping into the trash dump of the sky? Pay a tipping fee, Inglis, like you would if you were a trash hauler to the city dump. Pay for the space you take. And that starts to make sense to conservatives. They're like, yeah, that's a user fee. We cotton to that idea. That's pretty good. That means that we're bringing accountability. And if you make it so that I'm just made accountable, have to pay a tipping fee for dumping, then it becomes a level playing field, and my competitor starts beating me in the marketplace. Well, that stinks for me, but innovate, Inglis. Buy that new equipment. Your competitor across town has it. You could get it on a level playing field, but don't get away with dumping into the trash dump of the sky for free. That's just irresponsibility that we conservatives talk about with the left. They're just so easy peasy, freezy, and or free and easy and all that stuff. No, no, no. Bring accountability.
What is climate change to the conservatives right now? Is it this big global warming existential threat to humanity? Or when you're presenting it, do you try and find ways to speak locally? Like, do you talk about the impact to ag and spend time on that? And then if you're at Hilton Head, you're talking about, say, sea level rise and impact to tourism. Like, do you have to localize that threat that you see? Or do they already have that? They don't need it. You're delivering a mechanism that makes it a little bit easier to get engaged.
Yeah, that's what's so different about when I was getting tossed out in Congress and today. When I was getting tossed out is basically maybe it's something else. We'll come up with some other explanation about why why the water's coming up at Hilton Head, why the maple syrup business is moving north, we'll come up with some other reason. But most people have moved on to realize, oh no, it's real. So in Iowa last month, it was more like, oh yeah, we're aware. We're aware of the challenge. And at Hilton Head tomorrow, I think I'll find people saying, "Oh yeah, the fall is coming and the king tides are coming, and gee, it's for real." For example, near Hilton Head, Fort Pulaski, Georgia, 7 inches of sea level rise since 2010. Now, some of that is subsidence, water being pumped out of the water out of the ground, and the ground actually sinking. Some of it is sea level rise. And the most interesting thing that I find, it's also temperature of the water. That's a third factor. But the fourth one that I find so interesting is as the land ice melts at the poles, it loses some of its gravitational pull. And so because it's such large mass, it actually creates a gravitational pull that pulls water away from our coast. As it shrinks, the water will come up because it'll have less gravity being pulled on it by the land ice. Just amazing. And so when you consider 7 inches since 2010, and this is serious, and so more people are aware. They just want to, but here's the challenge. They put it in the realm of death and taxes. We can't do anything about it, so we just have to adapt. But what we're here to say is what my friend David Frum likes to say is we better hope it's human caused. Because if it's human caused, we can do something about it. If it's not, we're hosed.
Death and taxes. Pre-GFC, not a problem. Fighting over thermometers. Humans aren't the cause. Now there's nothing we can do. What happened to the middle ground of acceptance and trying to get involved? Like that for me is like where I'm really kind of. There's got to be a place where people can really say, okay, it's going to be a challenge, but there's something to do. So how do you convince them to go away from stop fighting over the thermometer and who's at fault and don't give up right away? Like, how do you get them right to even keel in the middle?
I think it's overcoming solution aversion. Solution aversion is where we don't think we had a solution that's practical or that fits with our values, and so we doubt the existence of the problem. Sounds irrational, but it's what every human does. And so think about it, the way that conservatives herd the climate is this. UN, blue helmets on, is going to come to the US and they're going to get with the much loved EPA, and they're going to regulate your very breath. Oh, if that's your solution, I don't have a problem. And so what we have to do is show that no, there's a solution that's practical and that fits with your values and that gets the world in on this thing. And then they can engage.
What are the solutions that you think are best placed at this point? And which ones do you think align the best? Like, which ones align to values the easiest? And are those the ones that you start with, knowing that you can get them on board with innovation, entrepreneurship? Like, or are you trying to sell solutions that are maybe a little bit beyond what the normal conservative value set would be?
Here's what we say. We say the 3 ways to fix climate change. And that may sound like an oversimplification. What do you mean 3 ways? You got to be more than 3 ways. Well, no, generally speaking, there are three big buckets that the solutions fall in. You can have a regulatory solution, you can have an incentive solution, or you can have a pricing solution. The first, the regulatory solution is we could regulate emissions here in America. That's surely possible, and it would produce some good results in terms of local air quality. The problem is, can't regulate Chinese emissions from here in America, or anybody else's emissions. And then, of course, the immediate challenge would be if you regulate here and say China or some other country doesn't regulate there, manufacturers may pick up and move from here to there. When they get there, they're emitting more than they were emitting here because we're pretty energy efficient here in America. So you just went downhill on solving climate change. Second possibility is to incentivize clean energy. That's like my example about the, Inglis Industries and the competitor across town. You could prop her up with some, my competitor, you could prop her up with some incentives. Now that also would produce some good things locally. You end up with cleaner air because you got fewer small particulates and you got fewer asthma cases, longer life expectancy. It's all good, but most of those incentives are tax incentives, that accrue only to American taxpayers. And so if you're not an American taxpayer, what the heck? You haven't changed their economics at all. All you've done is change the economics for American firms. So having politely dissed the regulatory and the incentive solution, you can tell that I favor the third one, which is the pricing solution, which we think is rock solid conservatism. Just do a carbon tax. Yeah, a tax. Here's a conservative talking about a new tax paired with a reduction in existing taxes. That makes it revenue neutral. The one I would choose is a payroll tax. You put on this carbon tax. You pair it with a reduction in payroll taxes because we're conservatives and we don't want to grow the government. And then here's the kicker, the real important thing. You apply that to imports in a World Trade Organization compliant way, because what it is, you're saying, hey, just like in the chemical industry where we have content taxes that are permissible, where you base a tax on the content of the stuff coming into your country, this would be a carbon content tax. And we'd be collecting it on products coming from countries that don't have the same carbon tax. If there's a sheet of flat steel coming through the port of Seattle right now from China, and we collect the carbon tax, that carbon tax could have been remitted to Beijing, but right now it's being remitted to Washington, D.C. Doesn't take the Chinese government long to figure out, hey, you know what? We'd like to collect that ourselves. And then they follow suit. No international, this is important for Uncle Charlie coming up at Thanksgiving, the conservative Uncle Charlie. Uncle Charlie, did you notice? No international agreement, no bowing and scraping at the UN, no protracted negotiations. Just a bold move by the United States says, we're ready to move on climate. You're probably going to find it in your interest, China and the rest of the world, to follow our lead, because otherwise, keep on paying our carbon tax on entry of your goods, okay? Because we got a terrible deficit and an awful debt, and we could sure use your money. And then here's the magic. 8 billion people start seeing the true cost of the burning of fossil fuels. So 3 solutions: you can regulate it, you can incentivize it, or you can price in the effects of burning fossil fuels. And we think the fairest and the fastest and the leanest government approach is that third one.
I'm really curious what you think about then when it comes to the ESG movement right now. Read on this on the conservative side is that by putting those standards in place, they're basically handicapping free enterprise. They're making it difficult, more costly. So I'm just curious, like how do you view that? Because it's outside the government's realm. It is the free market doing this, but in the same sense, like you're seeing a lot of pushback on it within government and within the community to say, like, look, this isn't the right way either. And for me, it's the market should be allowed to operate as it wants to. It should be able to allocate risk and figure out what they want to do. But if it becomes a disadvantage, to certain regions and that becomes a political issue, how do you balance that, or how should we look at that?
Well, I think there's always a reactionary force. When Henry Ford invented the Model T, there were buggy whip manufacturers who were very upset about that. That's what's happening now with people that burn rocks. They're basically in the position of the buggy whip manufacturers. And politicians will respond. There'll be a reactionary period in which they say, oh no, we got to keep on burning rocks. We got to keep on burning this stuff out of the ground. We can't go to small modular nukes. We can't go to fusion. We can't go to solar or wind. We can't with better battery backups. We can't do that because we got to hold on to what we got. And what we got is some old rocks that we can burn. But eventually, the buggy whip manufacturers they gave way to Henry Ford, and the people with the rocks, it's going to give way.
So in speaking to that resistance, I kind of want to go back to the culture and language conversation in the sense of how much of where we are right now is a result of this framing around it was a left issue, it was a right issue, it was a woke issue, it was a concern. Like how much of that is kind of where we get stuck on making progress, and What do you think the consequences of framing this as like an environmentalist thing, but now it's more pragmatic. Now it is more real over the course of 20, 30 years. Like by allowing it to get there 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when Al Gore's out there with, the inconvenient truth, did that prevent a lot of progress in your mind?
Yeah, and I don't think it was intentional on Al Gore's part. I don't think, but it did become culturally marked. And that cultural marking is what we struggle against every day at republican.org. It's seen as a left-wing thing. And we want to say, no, it's not a left-wing thing, particularly if we present it the right way. Too much time left of center, it's we're all going to die next Tuesday. It's, the apocalypse is upon us. We must walk and eat bugs. We must repent of the capitalistic system. We think that's all the wrong way to present it. What we say is that we're going to have more energy, more mobility, more freedom. It's just going to be cleaner, better, faster, and cheaper. And if we play our cards right, we're going to invent that stuff here in America, and we're going to sell it around the world, and we're going to create wealth and jobs. It's really pretty exciting. This is not doom and gloom about we're all going to die next Tuesday. It's about, wow, this is the next thing. There's something new on the horizon. We got better batteries. We hope, small modular nukes that can really come off an assembly line in a very much more efficient way of building than the gargantuan plants that often are over budget. It's really pretty exciting. It's not all this doom and gloom. And if you go back to that communitarian, egalitarian, and hierarchical individualist, there may be another element in there, and that is sort of the nanny state. Over here, it may be sort of like, oh, we're all going to die. We must protect each other, whatever. And then you got the swashbuckling side over here that says, no, no, there's something new and exciting. That there needs to be some more balance about that new and exciting.
What are the barriers you think exist that prevent conservatives from seeing that point of entry, from getting excited about the potential? Because I mean, most conservatives I know, they're very optimistic. They very much believe like if they get their hands in the dirt, they're going to be able to plant something that bears fruit. So like I don't think like that part, that's not the part that's missing, the hard work and knowing that there's fruit to be had through your labor. What's the barriers then?
Well, a number of them. The one that comes to mind instantly is the politicians that are with the buggy whip manufacturers. They're the ones that are, the buggy whip manufacturers have a little bit of money still because they sell a lot of buggy whips, selling a lot of rocks to burn. And so they're spending money with those politicians, and those politicians are using that language. The thing is, as my ad guy likes to tell me, all of us like change, but none of us want to be changed. And so we all like, "Well, let's have Thai tonight, let's have, Chinese dinner tomorrow, let's have Italian the next night." We all like change. We don't want anybody to change us, right? We want to be in control of this thing. And so there's a ready market for those words from the buddy whip manufacturing people because and politicians are inclined to use that language until it becomes obvious that hey, buggy whips are gone. Henry Ford is making a great product here.
I want to switch a little bit to where does the left and the right overlap? Are there specific issues? Are there specific tools? Do you see a space growing where there can be an honest engagement between the two sides of this right now?
I surely hope so. It's the solutionville I mentioned earlier. You have people way left who, specifically on climate change, people way left that want to, who believe that this is too good of a crisis to waste, and they want to load the wagon with their favorite topics. They figure, oh, everybody agrees on climate. No, 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 everybody does not agree on climate. Um, but they think, okay, that's on the wagon, but let's put other things on the wagon. So they said, let's put union organizing on the wagon. Well, that's really hard to sell here in South Carolina. And let's put, I don't know, slavery reparations on the wagon. Okay, really hard to convince a current generation to pay for the sins of previous generations. Okay, the wagon is sinking in the muck. And so, what we implore people left of center to do is please come back later and talk about union organizing in South Carolina, okay? Right now, we have this urgent problem of climate change. We got to get this wagon across the finish line. So please don't weigh the wagon down. So that's where the advice that I'd give left of center to right of center, it's people realizing that, hey, it's not going to look good long term to have been the people that stood in just great defense of the buggy whips and and the horse industry and the burning rocks and the burning the stuff that we get out of the ground. Is you really want to be with the people who are saying, hey, you know what? There's a new way to do this, and it's really pretty exciting. And particularly if you think about it, just think about the geopolitical impact there too. Is wouldn't it be great to say to some petro dictators, see if you can drink that stuff. We just don't need you like we used to. That would really be great. I was 5 times in Iraq, 4 times in Afghanistan, and I can tell you, it has an edge on it for me. I'd like to say to some petro dictators, see if you can drink that stuff, because we don't need you like we used to. We got small modular nukes that are like on our nuclear submarines that are powering Manhattan. I got 4 or 5 of those parked at the docks, and they're powering the entire Manhattan. Um, we just don't need you like we used to.
And that's kind of like, like I'm sitting in China. They have become what I call the OPEC of renewable energy. They own wind, they own solar, they own EVs, they own batteries, they own modular thorium-based nuclear technologies now. And for me, like I'm going to say, it comes at great pain to know that and to have followed that along, knowing that a lot of those technologies were coming out of U.S. universities through, taxpayer funded research, but were then mothballed because we didn't have what Chinese researchers like to call strategic stamina. And then they could pick it up. And I'm curious, like, how do we make up for some lost time here? I mean, we're creative, have a huge market, we have this space. Does that threat, that external threat of others getting this done, will that catalyze us?
Well, here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that we as Americans can do what John Kennedy did in the Rice University moonshot speech in September 62. He actually admitted in that speech that we were behind. No matter, we're going to catch up, he says. And he says we've had some failures. And he says, and others, and it's a little jab at the Soviets because he says, and we're maybe more public. He doesn't say than they are, than others might be. And so yeah, I pray for a time in politics where you can be that honest with the American people and say we're behind. China is apparently intent on leading this march to new energy. And yeah, we hear you over here saying that yeah, they're building a coal-fired plant a week. They maybe still are, and they certainly were, but they're moving ahead on the other very quickly. And so get the new talking points and realize that hey, we got some competition here.
And so, in that vein, do you see any collaborations happening right now between left and right on moving forward? And I say that noting recently that Josh Hawley was working with Elizabeth Warren on some legislation and AOC. Like there seems to be, middle left, middle right collaborations starting to happen. I'm wondering in the climate space, are you already seeing things like that happen? And if they are, like, what gives you that encouragement, and where are you seeing things moving forward?
I think that this is we're getting past the disputation era about climate. We're into the realization era. The question is whether we can now move to solutions. And what I hope happens is that people say, listen, okay, we didn't like that regulatory approach, the Clean Power Plan of the Obama administration. Okay, you didn't like the Joe Biden's incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act. What could work? Well, would a simple accountability for emissions work in a pricing mechanism? Well, that involves convincing conservatives that that's conservative, and we think it is rock solid conservatism. And it involves convincing some on the left to leave off some of their fondest notions about how to use this crisis to get other things. Leave those off the wagon. And let's see if we can talk about what our fondest dream is, talk about a pricing solution, because that's the one that goes worldwide if you have that carbon border adjustment mechanism. And uh, give me an amen, I'll stop preaching about that. We'll pass the plate, okay? Because I'm really, you'll hear me over and over about that's the solution.
Yeah, I really like that one because what I saw from here in Asia when Europe passed the CBAM, the carbon border adjustment mechanism that they had, was governments and supply chains and industry leaders, they took it seriously. Now, not so much in China as they did in other Southeast Asian nations where they didn't have, say, the power structure to push back too much, but the ability of a large market to put in a tariff, a tax, apply pressure to clean this up, it can be very effective very quickly. And it can also signal to your allies that it's time for them to do it or it's easier for them to do it. And so they can equate. And then therefore, it's an equal tax for everyone as you're kind of getting back to. And so I was a huge fan of the border mechanisms. I thought that was a really smart approach to it.
Yeah, it's the thing that makes it go worldwide. And then you've got a level playing field. Because the thing is, emissions anywhere, climate change everywhere. And so you've got to internalize it worldwide. That's what makes climate such a devilish problem. But thankfully, there's a solution. And it's using the interconnectedness of the world in trade to make it so that you can do that carbon border adjustment mechanism and exciting things happen. And the people that can innovate will lead the future. And so, my fellow Americans, are you ready to lead? Are you ready? Are you tired? Well, if you're tired, step aside. Somebody else will do it. Back to Kennedy. He says in that speech, he said, there's some who would like to wait and rest here, but America was not built by those who waited and rested. I mean, if you want to, it's just worth listening to that speech. It's where I go when I get discouraged in this business. 17 minutes of pure American exceptionalism.
So, in that vein, what advice do you have for climate advocates on either side who are seeking to bridge these ideological divides and to make progress?
On the left, please drop the political wedge that's been so successful and say, really, we've got a problem we got to solve. On the right, just realize that you're talking buggy whips if you're talking about burning rocks and burning petroleum and natural gas forever. And realize that Henry Ford has a new technology. And so get with the program and realize that the future is here. And if you want to lead the future, lead. If you want to hold on to the past, well, just know that your day is coming.
All right, last question. You're talking to a conservative who is passionate about climate, but they're unsure how to engage effectively or amplify their voice within the broader movement. How do they get engaged? How do they get involved? What should they focus on?
I would say to them, overcome your undeserved inferiority complex. You apparently think you're no good when it comes to energy and climate. And so you shrink in science denial or you change the subject. No, you're the kid in class with the answer. Raise your hand. Internalize negative externalities. That's all it's about. And then the free enterprise system can deliver innovation. This is a problem of economics. You're really good at this. Raise your hand.